Since Apollo 17 completed its mission and returned to Earth in 1972, the United States has terminated the moon landing program, and humans have not landed on the moon for half a century. However, rumors, speculation and even conspiracy theories about the moon landing program have never stopped, and NASA officials have never given a satisfactory answer to the public. In the same year that the moon landing program was terminated, the CIA, under the supervision of the Department of Defense, opened the Stargate Project, also known as the remote viewing experiment at that time. In 1998, an American named Ingo Swan wrote a book titled The Question of Extraterrestrial and Human Telepathy, which reveals his unbelievable experience of telepathy and remote viewing with aliens in a secret agencies of the United States in the 1970s and 1980s. The so-called remote viewing refers to the special ability to see distant objects beyond the scope of normal vision. That book not only introduces the superpower of remote viewing, but also the ability to look at the coordinates of a specific location and see what happened in that place in the past. When Ingo Swan published this book, many people regarded it as science fiction. Until 2017, according to the Freedom of Information Act, the CIA of the United States released a batch of files on supernatural research, including a project called Stargate Project, and the experimental data of some projects can be found on the official website. Only then did people know that the CIA had indeed conducted a project about human superpower research last for 20 years in the 1970s and 1980s, and people exclaimed that what Ingo Swan said was true. Research on superpowers during the Cold War. Let's pull the timeline back to the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union in the last century. In order to carry out the arms race, the United States and the Soviet Union spent a lot of manpower and continuously upgraded their weapons and equipment. At the same time, a lot of effort has been put into studying humans with special abilities, and the US military recruits and trains people with superpowers for military purposes. The so-called Stargate originally refers to the channel that can connect other spaces in the universe. Another theory is that aliens could peek or even walk through Stargate to attack humans. But the CIA's Stargate project in 1978 was not targeting aliens, but the Soviet Union during the Cold War. The core goal is to get intelligence on enemies thousands of miles away by hiring remote viewers and psychics. The declassified documents from the CIA's archives detail how the US military trains superpowers as below. In the beginning, the subjects need to completely relax their body, reduce the body's stress response to the outside world, and improve their inner feeling and the ability to visualize. The subjects then experience increased activity in the right brain function, resulting in an altered view of reality. After a year or two of training, the subjects may acquire the ability to remote view. The military can easily obtain confidential information through remote viewing capabilities, and can also predict possible enemies and risks, and even disable all nuclear bombs of the former Soviet Union through remote sensing capabilities. Although the story has obviously become a bit ridiculous at this point, there were actually quite a few people at the time who supported the Stargate Project. The participants included not only ordinary people but also well-known psychics such as the magician Uri Geller, who could bend spoons with his mind, and even attracted many scientists to participate. In the Stargate Project, the two most famous subjects were Ingo Swan, mentioned earlier, and Joseph McMoneagle, who retired from the US Army in 1984. Both of them are well-known figures in the field of remote viewing. The experiments the CIA gave to these subjects included seeing through sealed letters, and even remote viewing of Jupiter, Mars, and the back of the Moon, some areas that were not explored by humans at that time. In this episode, we will first introduce the detailed content of Ingo Swan and the Stargate Project, and then in the next episode we will introduce the remote viewing content of Joseph McMoneagle. Please don't forget to subscribe and follow us. Let's get started. The first subject, Ingo Swan. The name Ingo Swan may not be familiar to the general public, but to believers in psychic abilities, it's a household name. Ingo Swan served in the US Army from 1955 to 1958, primarily in the Far East and Korea. From 1958 to 1968, he worked for the United Nations Secretariat. After leaving the United Nations Secretariat, he pursued a career in writing and art, and became involved in the circle of parapsychologists. The reason why he is so famous as a person who claims to have superpowers is because he was associated with the CIA in his early years. Ingo Swan is best known for his ability to remotely view the weather in major US cities, and he also published papers describing the phenomenon of extrasensory perception. He could perform ultra-long-distance remote viewing under certain conditions. In his words, he can only show this ability with the help of a team, and as long as he knows the geographic coordinates, He can see the environment there. The Stargate Project was led by renowned physicist Dr. Russell Targ and engineering scientist Dr. Hal Puthoff, and its first test subject, Ingo Swan, was a CIA-validated person with actual psychic abilities. After hundreds of experiments, Targ and Puthoff confirmed that Swann could perceive and map out the surrounding environment solely based on the geographic coordinates they asked. Despite the fact that the coordinates used were random, Swann was able to obtain information with remarkable accuracy. Nevertheless, there were still some within the intelligence community who suspected that Swann might have secretly memorized the coordinates of the maps. Dr. Russell Targ has many scientist friends. He told them about Ingo Swan's superpowers, but no one believed him. In order to test the authenticity of Ingo Swan's superpower, several scientist friends of Dr. Russell made a surprise visit. They gave Swann a coordinate on the spot, which was south latitude 49 degrees 20 minutes, east longitude 70 degrees 14 minutes. This was actually a small island in the South Pacific. Swann closed his eyes in front of everyone, and after dozens of seconds of remote viewing, he described the landform of that place, which shocked these scientists. On April 27, 1973, Swann officially participated in the CIA's remote viewing experiment, where he was tasked with remote viewing Jupiter. At that time, the National Security Agency and Stanford University were also invited to participate. At 6 p.m. that day, Swann closed his eyes and entered a hypnotic state. It took him 3 minutes to finally remotely view Jupiter. He said the first thing he saw were Jupiter's rings. Interestingly, before 1974, people only knew that Saturn had rings and didn't know that Jupiter also had rings. So Swann's remote viewing experiment was considered a failure at that time. However, 7 months after Swann's Jupiter remote viewing experiment ended, evidence of Jupiter's rings was obtained by the Pioneer 10 spacecraft during its flyby of Jupiter. This discovery surprised Dr. Russell Targ and his team members greatly. In a sense, Ingo Swan may have been the first person to discover the rings of Jupiter. Suspected buildings on the far side of the moon. Because the US lunar landing program only targeted the front side of the moon, people knew nothing about the back side of the moon at that time, even today. But in 1975, NASA's lunar probe mysteriously took photos of many suspected buildings on the back of the moon, so NASA sent people to contact Dr. Russell Targ, asked the Superpower team to conduct remote viewing experiments on the back of the moon, and gave Ingo Swan some coordinates of the moon. After preparing for a while, Swann closed his eyes and entered a semi-sleep state to begin remote viewing. Soon, Swann said he saw some buildings with glass domes in these locations. Dr. Russell asked Swann to go deeper and see what was inside those buildings. Later, Swann said he entered the buildings and saw humanoid creatures. As Swann continued remote viewing, his face suddenly twisted and he couldn't answer Russell's questions. It seemed like he had encountered something terrible. Russell felt uneasy and immediately woke up Swann. After waking up, Swann recalled that when he remotely watched these humanoid creatures, these creatures also felt his remote viewing behavior, which caused fear in Swann's heart and caused damage to his hypnotic state. Thus, the experiment of remotely viewing the far side of the moon came to an end. Next up is Swann's colleague Joseph McMoneagle, also known as Remote Viewer 1. Joseph surpasses Ingo Swan with his abilities in remote viewing and retrocognition. Just give him a set of coordinates and a time, and he can see events that occurred at that location many years ago. Although this may sound like fantasy, it is indeed a real event recorded by the CIA as a classified file. As for what Joseph said during the Stargate Project experiment, we will summarize it for you in the next episode. If you enjoy this type of theme, please leave a comment or like this video. See you next time.